welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing with you a book review for basically the last 3 months. I think that's what it covers. So if you enjoy this type of content and other homeschool and lifestyle content, please remember to subscribe and let's get into it. So my last book review, I talked about reading the Lunar Chronicles and how much I love them. They're by Marissa Meyer and they were just so good. I love them so much, and my daughter, who is 11 and a half, read them as well. There's 4 books, and then there's a whole bunch of I think there's prequels and a few short stories that go with them. I think she read them all. I didn't read all the extra books, but I just read the 4 main books and I loved them so much. So I kept looking up other Marissa Meyer stuff. She does young adult fiction, not fiction. Yes, fiction. I don't know why sometimes fiction and nonfiction get so confusing in my head. But I went through all those, and when I got Cinder, the very first one in the Lunar Chronicles, I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm gonna like these. And it was for book club that we read it. And so I didn't buy all of them in a trilogy set. It's not a trilogy, like a quartet, I don't know. And I didn't buy the box set, but I wish that I had. I think it was cheaper, and I loved them so much that I'm like, I should have bought the box set. So with the next series, I did buy the box set, and this is the Renegades trilogy, and this one is more about superheroes, and I really loved this trilogy as well. And it's kind of, yeah, I don't know, I can't think of what the show is. There's a TV show where they kind of have superpowers, sort of not. Is it called Heroes? I don't know. I don't know about those kind of things. We love watching Marvel movies, and so all the superheroes from those types of movies, Captain America, the Iron Man, Hulk, Thor, all those people. We love watching those people. And so this was fun. It's a interesting story, an interesting take on it. I feel like with each of her books, because I read the 4 in the Lunar Chronicles, this trilogy, and then a duology I'm gonna share with you. It always takes me a while to get into the very first book. My husband, when I was reading, I think it was these ones, because Renegades is the first one, and he's like, oh, it's not as good as the other. And it is as good, it's different. I think the Lunar Chronicles were my favorite out of all the ones I've read, but it's just different. And since you're establishing a whole new story and a universe, basically, it takes a little while to get really into the story, because you have to explain who some of the characters are and how they get their superpowers and what they can do and all these different things. So I really liked this story, and right from the beginning you find out that the girl in it her name's Nova. She is basically a villain, sort of like that. I don't know if she would always categorize herself as that, but she's definitely not a hero. But she goes undercover with the heroes and to try to figure out some things that they want to know so that they can conquer them. So anyways, that's kind of the storyline, and it goes throughout all of the books. And I really, really enjoyed it. It's clean for the most part. There's some romance going on, but nothing crazy. I don't feel like there was really much language either with that. The dads, so he has dads. The main character, the boy that's a hero, has dads. So that's just something to note. You get a mix of homosexual and heterosexual relationships in Marissa Meyer's book. So if that's a sensitive topic for you, then just so you know that. So I haven't had my daughter read these 2 that I'm sharing with you today, because, so first of all, with this one, I think after the prologue, it would be okay. It's very intense. The very beginning of the book is very intense, and it's kind of hard to read, to be honest, and I think that it would be too much for her right now at this age. The rest of it, I'd be fine with her reading. I just feel like it's a little bit intense in the beginning, and it might be hard for her. But she's also read a lot of other books that probably were similar, so she'd probably be okay with it. This series, I think within the next year or 2, she'd probably be totally fine reading, and I wouldn't even have a problem with her reading it for the most part. The other one I'm gonna show you, I feel like she needs to be older. feel like these series kind of went in order from youngest teens to oldest teens. So like the Lunar Chronicles, I feel like it was a perfect reading age for her, like for 11, 10-year-olds, and you know, older obviously, because I am not 11 or 10 years old. But then the Renegades trilogy, I feel like is a little bit older from that. It's not crazy, but a little bit. And then this last one I read, this duology that I read, is the Gilded and Cursed duology. I feel like this one would be older teens, to be honest. It was sometimes even hard for me. And the reason why is it's a darker story. It is not something that if you told me, even as I read the back of it, I was hesitant to get it because I just didn't know if it was something I was actually gonna like. It, you know, it's a Rumpelstiltskin story, basically, like her take on a Rumpelstiltskin story, blah, blah, blah. Which all of her books are kind of that. Like the Lunar Chronicles is all about different fairy tales that she's taken a spin on. You know, this is a superhero one that she took a spin on. And then these ones are Rumpelstiltskin story that has had a spin on it. Maybe some of it's really true to the story. I don't know. I just have like the story I learned when I was a child. And then the one from watching Once Upon a Time, the TV show from Rumpelstiltskin there. And in that, he's called the Dark One. And in this, the like bad person is called the Dark One. And so it's confusing to me because it's not the same person. Rumpelstiltskin and the Dark One are not the same person in this book. But I think some of the stories, I think my husband had kind of looked it up, in the original like Grimm fairy tales might be similar to this too. I have never read any of those, at least not like straight from the Grimm fairy tales. So anyway, that's what I have to say about that. But it is a darker book. It's talking, you know, it's kind of a mix between being in this world, but a long time ago, more like medieval times, I would say. That's kind of the feeling it gave to me. And then crossing into the dark world once a month. Like once a month on a full moon, the dark ones can come out of the other realm and they come and kill people and they kill children and different things are going on. And so it has another, like it's a romance story as well. And this girl who says she can spin gold, she can't actually spin gold. So then it goes through how she survives the Dark One, and everyone's amazed that she hasn't been killed yet by him, and goes through her whole story. And then obviously it has the next one. Her books tend to end somewhat abruptly. So you want to have the next one. It's not like, you know, every book that's in a series usually has some sort of cliffhangers, but I feel like hers are fairly intense. And so I always am like, oh my gosh. And like you need the next book because you are ready to like, what happened? Like, why did it do this? So I enjoyed these ones as well. Like I said, it's a darker story and not something I would typically read, but I did like the story. I feel like she did a good job. But as far as for my daughter to read it, I think she needs to be like her older teen years, just because of the type of story it is and how dark it is. There's more like blood and gore type stuff. Again, the language is fine, and I feel like the romance story is fairly mild as well, but there's just other things with it being crossing over into that dark world that just makes it a little bit more difficult and hard. I don't even know if my daughter would like this kind of book. So all of these books, it's amazing they came from the same author because they're very different and similar at the same time, but they cover so many different things. She can write in such a dynamic way. I really appreciate that. The last book I wanted to mention is The Scarcity Brain, and this is by Michael Easter. And I reviewed The Comfort Crisis, maybe the one right before this book review, I can't remember, but it was earlier this year. And I like The Comfort Crisis more. This one was still good, but I do like that one better. I do think that one though has more swearing, like F-word swearing in it, because it has a whole story that underlies the book, which is why I think I like it better. It's just easier to follow and understand. But because it has that story and he's quoting one of his friends, this friend swears a lot. So there's a lot of swearing. There's still swearing in this one for sure. Like there just is, that's just how he writes. And so if you don't want to read that kind of stuff, then don't read these books because they have lots. But I feel like their ideas are very, very good and refreshing, I guess. This one, I am trying to even, if I can explain it, it's hard for me to even wrap my head around, but if you've heard the ideas of like scarcity versus abundance, like having a scarcity mindset, always worried maybe you're not gonna have enough money, we're not gonna have enough of this, so you kind of hoard things, or you're just worried, you know, you keep money because one day you might not have money, but that means you're not living now because you're saving all the money, right? So maybe you'll be 80 and have millions of dollars, but you didn't do anything when you were 40, you know, because you were too scared that you wouldn't have money. And so that kind of idea is what this book is about. And it goes more into some of the science behind it, some of the different, he starts out by talking about casinos and how they function with this scarcity mindset and how our brains work really well in that environment, but not well at the same time, right? It's not someplace we want to stay, but sometimes it's easy for us to get stuck in them. And he goes through the idea with food as well. And he goes to some different cultures that have really good like hearts and everything, how heart disease is such a big problem in the United States. And so he goes to these other cultures, and I think along the Amazon. It's been a few months since I read this book, and it took me a few months to read it because it just is, it's a deep thinking type of a book. And for someone like me, it's just hard for me to try to wrap my head around all the ideas of it. And so he goes to this other culture to see what they eat and how like their heart health is so good. Yes, they still die from other things, but they have very, very good heart health because of the food they eat. So he talks about all those kinds of things. In the scarcity brain that we kind of, or mindset that we get stuck in different kinds of circumstances. And one of the things that I thought was cool, like I always write down a bunch of notes like at the back. And so I have like all these quotes and different things that are great for me to go back and review. Obviously, I would not sit here and just go through them with you because that would be really long. But I liked how he talked about some of the different types of pride. And then he says that it's the much harder but more effective ways to actually go out into the world and do great things, and then status arises naturally, right? Because sometimes as you are trying to increase your status, you're not doing necessarily good things to do it. You might push people out of the way. You might do whatever it takes to get there. And so it's not really a great thing once you get there, and you might be all alone. Nobody likes you. You're a horrible person. And so it's more of this, if you go out into the world, you're trying to do good things instead of looking for what's scarce, right? You're looking for what's abundant. You go out and you create more abundance. You naturally start to rise. It just is what happens. And you can see it. There's so many examples of that in the world today as well. And then he talks about, do you want to be right or happy? This is all again with pride, and just this different idea how sometimes like they can't be the same thing. Sometimes they can be, but sometimes they can't. Because it says, do I want to look good or be happy? Do I want to one up this person or be happy? Do I want to be right or be a good friend, coworker, or significant other? So there's different things in the world that sometimes we have to learn how to let those things go and focus more, again, on this abundance idea instead of scarcity. And he has so many good chapters, right? He talks about, I was just gonna read some of them, so that, not the whole chapter, you're like, oh my gosh. But he talks about, first of all, what the scarcity brain, like an overview, what the scarcity loop is that we can get stuck into, like the different points of it, and then goes through why, like gambling, I'm like, what is it even called? Gambling puts us into that loop, and why people get so stuck in it, because that's what happens, right? It hooks you in. Why we crave more, and then how to get out of it. and then talks about it in relation to food, in relation to having a lot of stuff, right? Instead of more minimalistic, and you don't have to be like a complete minimalist, but the same idea applies. Like we see stuff on Amazon, right? And we have to have it. So we push the button, and then we see something else and we push the button, and we get this quick feedback, this quick reward. And so we keep doing it. We want to keep doing it and getting more things, even though our bank account does not like it when we do that. And it's not good for us either, right? We're not practicing any self-control. And he talks about it in relation to happiness, in information, like just the information that we have in the world. And he always has a lot of life experiences. He tries to go out and like put it to the test and see what happens and see how he comes out on the other side of it, which I think is really cool. So I do like the ideas of this book. There's some of the chapters that I feel like would be good for me to go back over and review and try to implement some of the things. And it is a harder read. Maybe not for, like I said, maybe not for everyone, but it is difficult to understand. Some of it's more scientific, and it just is, it's a deep thinking book. And if you know what I mean, if you've read these types of books, it's not like reading these books. You sit down in an afternoon and read this book, and they're way bigger than this book. And it took me months to read this book because it kind of makes your brain exhausted thinking about it. So anyway, it's really good for your brain, but it's also exhausting. So I would recommend this book as well. And then I also just wanted to quickly mention that I read several books on my Kindle. I was kind of just in a very I needed my brain to relax because there were so many other stressors going on. Thinking about a book too hard was difficult for me. And so I was gonna just mention a few authors that I do like from the Kindle that's more like Regency romance type stuff. So Bree Wolfe is one. I'm looking at my notes to make sure I tell you everyone right. Jodie Headland is another one. And then Ashton Newbold is one of my favorites. She doesn't put out books as frequently, but I feel like her books are good. Like this story is just very fun to read, the romance story. So I read The Parlor Game. That was her most recent one. And that one was really fun to read. And they're Regency romance type books. So anyway, if you're looking for something that you can just maybe quickly read on the Kindle that gives your brain a little bit of a break or something, or if you have goals for the new year with books, then maybe you can put down some of those easier reads to break up some of the harder ones. So anyway, thought I'd share. All right, I hope you enjoyed this book review. Let me know down in the comments what books you are enjoying right now, or maybe some that you didn't, because then maybe we won't want to read those either. And also what your goals are for this year. Like, what are your reading goals? Is it a certain amount of books, a certain type of genre you want to try, or whatever, or maybe an author that you haven't tried before? Let us know down in the comments below. Remember to give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you next time.